We are live on YouTube. Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. So let's begin. So we have our guest today with us, Akshata, Namjoshi, and also Luna. So Luna de Lange. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I need to. I think she's unmuted.
Yes, I'm unmuted. Ramanuj,
Yeah.
Luna de Lange, but either way, doesn't matter. Please pronounce it as you wish. I'm not phased.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Thank you for having us.
Let's welcome both our guests today. Thank you so much for making time for this. And why don't we begin by having a little bit of introduction about your firm, which is Karm, and both of you, like starting with maybe Luna, you can start.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ramanuj. I am Luna de Lange. I am originally from South Africa, now resident in the United Arab Emirates. I am a partner of Karm Legal Consultants. We are a emerging technology focused legal practice. We all have varied, all the members of Karm have a varied backgrounds, and we're a multidisciplinary team of attorneys that can facilitate many fields of law, but we have made the collective decision to focus primarily on technology. Insofar as technology is concerned, I head up the data protection, IT, and cyber and information security, as well as threat intelligence practice. And also, I'm going to hand you over to Akshata because I feel it's only fair that she do the introduction because she was one of the founding members of Karm Legal Consultants. She's going to tell you a little bit more about the firm and then tell you about herself.
Great.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Luna. So we're actually a young firm. We were incorporated only in August of 2018. Having said that, the firm comprises of lawyers from different sectors. They're specialized in different sectors. The founder herself, Kokila, she's been here in UAE for roughly 17 years now. I, for one, I was, as Luna said, one of the founding members. Our firm has, in the last roughly, let's say, 19 or 20 months by now, we focused on various sectors. We started with a lot of blockchain and cryptocurrency projects. We have had a successful run with a lot of tokenization based projects from the region and beyond. We've focused a lot on crowdfunding. We've focused quite a bit on a lot of emerging fintech solutions in the region. We have done quite a bit of work now with Luna joining us. Our data protection and cybersecurity practice is really strong. And yes, we are heavily now focusing on open banking and Robo advisory now in this sector. We're based in UAE itself, and we have our offices, also affiliate offices in Malta. So we're really, based both in Europe and UAE.
Got it. Akshata, why don't you also tell a bit about yourself and your personal journey before you started Karm?
So I studied. I'm originally from Indore. I studied at NLIU Bhopal. I then did my masters from NUS Singapore after that. I was mostly a corporate commercial lawyer. Initially, when I started out, I was working with Amarchand for a couple of years in Delhi before I moved to Dubai. Again, I think we all collectively, and we're very lucky, I think, in that regard, that as a team, we had all of us independently wanted to do something which was not conventional, which was different, which was, tech focused. Luckily for us, we started getting a lot of clients who kind of trusted us with their work in this regard. So yeah,
How did you travel from Delhi to Dubai? I mean, that's an interesting choice for lawyers in India. So if you can throw some light on it.
I'm not so sure if it is like the perfect plan, so to speak, what I did. But I think I was really done with the kind of whatever work focus of tier ones per se in India. So I was really looking for something different. I was looking for something which was little more dynamic, so to speak, at least from my personal experience. And that's how Dubai happened. It just happened, I don't think there was a plan.
Okay. And, so what led to the idea of this firm being started, Income Legal Consultants being started, and why this very, unusual choice of focusing only on tech domain? Of course, there are generally when people start law firms, the trend is people want to call themselves the full service law firm rather than, of course, there are many notable exceptions, but what made you choose this domain and why focus only on technology?
I think the fundamental reason also is because all of us are experienced generalist lawyers. So the founding team or the first people who were starting the firm were doing it a lot more out of choice than out of any other reason. So we've been there, we've seen the generalist practice of corporate commercial law, real estate, M&A, private equity. We've collectively, between all of us, we have had that experience all this while. But increasingly, with the growing technology, with the kind of projects that we were looking at, and something that we were, very interested in at that point of time, uh, we realized that it's gone are the days when you could be just like a general practitioner. You cannot really stick to that anymore. You really need to have focus areas. You really need to have that kind of thought process, sector specific thought leadership, or something that you really need to contribute to the sectors that you're focusing on.
That's right.
People's innovation in
Yeah.
that.
And if I may
Right.
add to that, so as Akshata has said now, to use the word thought leadership. So the founder of our firm, Kokila Alag, had back in 2003 did her master's in digital currencies or e-money, and also for digital economies law, and then also she did in digital signatures. And she says herself in her own words that she had to wait so many years for this actually to come up as a field of law and to become a reality in practice. So she was very, very successful on her own here in Dubai. This is the third firm that she's setting up here. She was partner of a very large Emirati firm before she broke away and formed Karm. So she took a very big leap of faith. She is an absolute thought leader and a wonderful mentor to our team. And she has really been the driving force behind all of us to, basically grow our personal strengths and become focused on specific areas of law, and become dynamic in those areas and help develop those areas, because these are such niche areas and new areas of law. We often see that we work with these pieces of or these focus areas from the ground upwards, starting off with the regulators, seeing what they are looking at, and then help actually to write some of the law and taking this forward. So, really, it is thanks to that, and for somebody to believe in you, to give you the opportunity to work that way. And Akshata also correctly said, the UAE has also been a very good platform for that. We see innovation, we see funding, we see all of those things here. We see the regulators, becoming very willing to look at new technologies and wanting to be seen as innovators in the space.
Right.
And this being one of the forerunner regions in the whole of the GCC. So,
So
yeah.
I'd like to talk about that in a bit. That how Dubai is going about its policy with respect to blockchain and even like being very technology focused and
Mm-hmm.
bringing in innovators from all around the world. And in fact, I know many of my friends who are in the blockchain or AI space. They have moved to Dubai in the last few years because it offers such a great market and such a supportive environment. But before we get to that, also Luna, if you can share some of your personal journey, like how did you come into this area of work, and what led to you for you to work in Dubai and come?
Yes, absolutely, with pleasure, Ramanuj. Thank you for the question. So, in South Africa, I had for 9 years practiced at a firm, and I was a senior associate there, where I practiced civil litigation. So I was a litigator for most of my years of practice, and primarily doing insurance and medical law type work. What I did therein, however, is that I also became involved more in the technology space because my husband is a threat intelligence specialist. Well, what they traditionally term as threat intelligence, but it's cyber threat intelligence. So it's a very niche field of specialization in the cyber security field. And that's what brought us to Dubai. So we had fantastic opportunity. He works for an American company that had granted us the opportunity to come to Dubai. So we had to take a very big leap of faith. I was at that stage a co-director of my own practice, and I had to make the decision to give that up. And I'm so happy actually that I did, because I didn't lose in the end. I gained so much more by coming here. But that's my personal story and background. I'm very fortunate to be able to say that. But I've always taken a very keen interest in the field of technology itself. And having a litigation background, I really do feel helps me to understand what basically the end result should or should not be, and work backwards from there in reverse engineering certain things that we do. So in all transactions that we do, we always think about that and keep that in mind. So none of us can say that we straight off the bat could have jumped into any of these fields. It helps tremendously that we all have the backgrounds that we do, and complementary to one another, because I don't have the background that Akshata has. She doesn't what I have. And neither do any of the others, but we've become such a complementary team to one another that it's helped us to grow into what we do. And, you know, Akshata has mentioned a couple of fields, but just to tell you as well, so we specialize in fintech. She's mentioned blockchain, cryptocurrency related activities. Then again, the dedicated practice of data protection and privacy. We do a lot in the medical technology sphere, prop tech and real estate, insurance technology, then the cyber, like we mentioned, artificial intelligence, robo advisory, which we're going to discuss with you a little bit more today, robotics, and then we have a dedicated verticals of policy and governance drafting and advisory, and we have trainings and educational workshops that we do as well. So those basically are the three primary fields: the transactional department of our firm, policy and governance, and then training. So we really are the whole package for technology.
Great, great. That's really wonderful. You know, if you can start by telling us a little bit about why Dubai is becoming such a technology hub, and why it's attracting so many, and what does the government have a long-term strategy or a policy for attracting innovators and financial technology, especially, and like, you know, this kind of technology coming to Dubai. And also, you mentioned Malta sometime back, that you have an office in Malta.
That's
Is
right.
it because of it's extremely friendly towards cryptocurrency companies, or what is driving certain economies around the world to become friendly, you know, jurisdictions for new financial technology and other technology?
Right. So Ramanuj, actually very valid point there. UAE as a whole, and not just Dubai, UAE, both Abu Dhabi, Dubai, other Emirates. I think the more and more focus is shifting to facilitating innovation, hosting a lot of these innovative solutions from this jurisdiction in itself. Also, the fundamental focus has been to not let UAE or this region be perceived as oil economies anymore. And they've made it clear through their different policies that they've come out with, through a vision of it's called the Vision 2021, which by which they want to have most of the government departments all functioning on blockchain by this time. They have introduced multiple different kinds of licenses, be it in and around robo advisory, open banking, crypto issuances, exchanges, over the counter trading, multiple licensing models. For those of you who are aware of how UAE works, it works on licensing models, and they've introduced a lot of them afresh. Having said that, like Luna mentioned, we are also heavily working in the policy space, where we are part of the Arab Monetary Fund, which is uh, it's a consortium of banks, central banks, and monetary authorities from 22 Arab nations. And I say this with a lot of pride, that all the nations are exploring ways to implement technology to bring out, to be able to host different solutions here. We, in our experience, have been able to contribute and draft policies on digital identity, KYC, cybersecurity, different fintech strategy guidelines, and we are now working on alternate modes of investments like crowdfunding, tokenization, P2P. So there's a lot of interest and enthusiasm that we have seen in this part of the world. Uh, Mostly the approach from the regulators has been extremely positive. Through their comments, through their through whatever publications that they've made, they've invited a lot of interaction from participants from different parts of the world, people who are possibly who have solutions which are already in place, who already know how things should function. They've invited a lot of conversation in the last at least 3 or 4 years that we've been working in this space.
And on that as well,
Got it.
Ramanuj, like Akshata said, this is something that I haven't experienced in any other jurisdiction, where the regulators will sit with you one-on-one on a very more informal basis, but sophisticated as such that they are very learned in their specific fields of engagement with you. And that they want to hear from private players in the market, and they will ask us, what have we been seeing with our client, what are our clients' needs, what is typical problems that we see that are faced, and they try to accommodate you as well, to be reasonably flexible in terms of the regulations and develop the regulations as such, that so as to not stifle technology innovation. And that's fantastic to see. We love that sense of embracing of the development of technology. Of course, that's what keeps our passion going.
Right. I think that's a very exciting situation, because like I was sharing, I have seen many of my, you know, friends are actually shifting to Dubai to like who want to work on blockchain or AI kind of technologies, and even other more advanced technologies, which many of the things that I don't understand, I hope to ask you questions and learn more about today.
With
So
pleasure.
one thing that I just would tell everybody who is in the session, that you can ask questions, but we had to shut down the chat over here because of Zoom bombing. So, but our live chat is open on YouTube, right? You can go to YouTube channel of Lawsikho right now and put the questions there. I am looking at the chat right now, and if there are any questions, I'm going to answer them, right? So feel free to also just go to the Lawsikho. If you have a question, just go to Lawsikho YouTube channel and post your questions there in the live chat section, and I'll be very happy to answer them for you, right? So that will be a great. That way we can take your questions, and the speakers can answer. One question that I have though is, like, what are there any kind of course Dubai is a tax friendly jurisdiction. There's taxation really works out as far as Dubai is concerned for companies, because if you're doing international business, you're not paying any significant tax, from what I understand. Maybe you can explain what is attracting technology companies, especially financial technology companies and SaaS companies, to Dubai. I mean, that will be a very like a starting point, and next we'll start talking about some of the other concepts.
Right. So, uh, Ramanuj, in UAE, the way it operates is that there are, as I said, there are various free zones and mainland options. Free zones meaning that there are multiple licensing options which are available to expatriates, which are available to foreign shareholders to come incorporate a company and obtain a license. Now, majorly, there are three, specifically speaking of fintech, if there are three financial regulators in UAE. One is the DFSA from DIFC, FSRA from Abu Dhabi Global Market, and ESCA, which is the federal regulator. Now, between themselves, and I always like to say this, that this is within a within a sphere of 200 miles. There are three regulators who are giving you options for, let's say, setting up a crowdfunding platform, having payment systems kind of mechanism there, issuance of tokens, having crypto exchanges, other various options for having digital investment management. So within that sphere itself, there are so many different licensing options which are there, and these regulators are very, as Luna mentioned, they're extremely knowledgeable. They have robust technical checks. They have very, very detailed licensing processes. So the license in itself, it's actually a very respectable license, so to speak, because somebody who's, let's say, an investor, or somebody who's like the market enthusiast, should be aware of the fact that if they are licensed with any of these jurisdictions, then possibly the governance model and the regulatory model is very robust. So I think it's a mix of both. So multiple options, and also because the regulators are very, they're much ahead of their times, honestly.
Got it. So if just to understand, if I'm getting this right, let's say if I want to do equity crowdfunding, I could possibly go to the UAE and do it from there, and I can set up a company and do a equity crowdfunding there, and people from other country can pay in, and I can raise money that way.
Exactly.
That's correct. Okay,
Correct.
so I think that's like a major reason why many companies will want to base themselves out of you.
Exactly.
And similarly, there are other similar factors where you get to run blockchain projects or other things under clear regulations and with legitimacy. That is very difficult. The exact problem we are facing in India, for example, today, where
So there are 40, yeah, there are 45 free zones, Ramanuj. So you can imagine. So they are focused free zone for, let's say, a media kind of setup. They're focused free zones for software, focused for art, and different focus free zones which are trying to build an ecosystem. In addition to this, a lot of regulators within UAE itself they've come out with various sandboxing options. So as of yesterday, I know DIFC, the Dubai International Financial Center, they've already 85 players have graduated from the sandbox, and they are inviting more and more people in the new cohorts. So
wow.
comparable to Singapore, I think UAE sandbox model is extremely robust, and it's very successful. It's been successful.
And if I may
Right.
add, cost-wise, there is opportunity. They are making exceptions in terms of the costing of these licenses as well to accommodate startups. So as one example, one of the financial free zones, Abu Dhabi Global Markets, ADGM, provides for a tech startup license, which yearly, I think, costs around $700 or $800. So they keep the costs extremely low. You can take up desk space in the form of a WeWork desk, which will also grant you a visa, residency visa in the UAE. So they really do try and help to accommodate to get you here, and then also help to facilitate support to you on a ground level to ensure your success, because they don't want to see you getting up and running and then crashing 2-3 years down the line. That's something that they've actually made very clear to us, is that why they regulate it so stringently and try and help you along to become compliant and remain compliant is because they want to ensure success to you. They take pride in the entities that are registered under their particular licenses, and they look after you. So
Right.
as one example, now with this COVID-19 pandemic, there have been several circulars sent to various entities that are regulated under the umbrella of these bodies, and they've offered their assistance. They've offered specific reporting lines. They've asked for specific notifications to be sent to them so that they can keep tabs on what is happening with specific entities. They've really taken an active interest in these organizations and reached out from their side to governmental authorities for assistance to those entities as well. So there's very much a hand-holding process, but of a very sophisticated nature.
Right. So UAE is kind of building like a technology company paradise, and like we say that USA was built by immigrants, and UAE is building itself based on technology immigrants. Like it sounds something like that. Sounds like a very smart
Absolutely,
strategy.
but not just UAE. I must say it's true for the GCC region, but UAE is most certainly a forerunner in this space.
So how is it like to run a law firm in this environment? Because I'm understanding that you are constantly dealing with new technology, new kind of companies, and I'm guessing a large number of companies coming from different countries and coming to the UAE. So what is it like to actually build a law practice in this scenario? Like if you could throw some light like beyond the obvious stuff, but if you can tell us what is it like? Like how do you guys go about it? Like you you're a 20-month-old law firm, I understand, and like so what is it like you I mean, you meet tech entrepreneurs every day, you go to events, or you do your own events, or where do you meet these people, and is it a community? How does it really work?
It's actually very dynamic, Ramanuj, and UAE in itself, it has roughly 80% of the population is an expatriate population, which means that it is really global in the demographics, so to speak. So we have while dealing with our clients, we've dealt with clients from, I think, possibly every part of the world. We've had clients from Europe, we've had clients from Far East in Asia,
Mm-hmm.
everywhere, every sector possibly.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, because of the kind of environment that is now building up, the communities are also slowly starting to build up. Like, we were one of the first possibly lawyers in the blockchain space 3 years ago in UA itself. We've been the first of many in this space, in fact, and we kind of take pride in that. But what is very advantageous is that the community has all sorts of players. So the community will also have regulators who are going to help you. They will also have people who are kind of developing solutions. There will be bigger companies which are already in play. Pretty much every big tech giant across the world is now looking at having one arm in the Middle East somewhere. So from
Definitely.
that perspective, I think we consider ourselves lucky, and also we've from our end we've tried to work hard to build communities where they weren't.
Right,
So
right.
And if I
uh,
can add to that also is
hmm,
that,
hmm.
we've been fortunate in that the clients that we have had the opportunity and privilege of assisting so far have, by word of mouth, promoted us in such a way that we are the go-to firm in the space. And just in that itself, and the regulators as well, I mean, believe it or not, but the regulators have actually come to us for assistance or referred, you know, potential license applicants to us as
Engagements.
well. Yes, and
Right.
we've been fortunate in that respect. But one thing I will say, and you said, except for the obvious, but I have to repeat what Akshata said. This has taken a lot of hard work, a lot of long hours, blood, sweat, and tears. It's an
So
unknown
what is
space
your
for us
real
all.
it's quite hard to start a law firm in a short time to make a name, because obviously there are a lot of big law firms and they are also studying these opportunities. They are also going to come after the same opportunities, and of course
Yes.
they have sometimes more resources and more well-known lawyers, even if they're, let's say, well-known in M&A or some other kind of practice, but it's easier for them to use their leverage their existing relationships, etc. So how do you, as a young law firm, have managed to kind of carve out your niche, or in fact compete? Like, what is your strategy? I'm sure it's an ongoing strategy to compete with
Mm-hmm.
bigger law firms and new competitors on both sides. Like, one hand you have like older competitors who are been around for longer, and there are new entrants who'd come and try to kind of cut down prices, etc. And how do you deal with that?
so I think, and we have it written on our wall in huge black letters. It says "law done differently." So I think that has been our mantra since day one. And that you can look at law very differently from the way you have been looking at it so far. I think increasingly the job of a lawyer is less to churn out agreements and documents, like a machine, but more to be the kind of person who's in the middle of a regulator and an industry. So you do understand the problems of the industry, but you do also understand the concerns of the regulator, and that is where more and more the job of a tech lawyer is coming into place. Luckily for us, I would say, lawyers across the world, and I can say this from my experience of having spoken to so many lawyers, they've taken time to warm up to technology. They've taken time to understand that this is not something that's in the future. It's now, and
Mm,
you will have to take a plunge into it.
correct. Yeah.
So that, from that perspective, I think none of our team members have any sort of doubts or apprehension to when it comes to supporting technology and even embracing it. Right? Everything for us is today. Everything that feels like future is not really future. It is today. So start dealing with
Yes.
with it now and
Yeah.
find a best way to.
So I understand that you are faster to understand and work on cutting a technology because you are more agile compared to say a larger law firm. But
Yeah.
and see, everybody says let's do lawyering differently, etc. Is that? But what is it that if we go a little deeper,
Hmm.
what is that different or the USP that you bring on to it?
So, for instance, in the very beginning of the law firm in itself, when Karm started, for instance, we did away with the hourly model for many of our projects. We are not somebody who would want to sit and argue on one word and like the same reps and warranties and the same conditions precedent and then charge you for the same thing. We take on projects. We take on projects whole and soul, and we right from the very beginning we help them to the very end. And I think that was one of the major kind of business structuring decisions that we took early on. Other than that, we really, I mean, it's kind of audacious to say this as a young law firm, but we've been very selective about the kind of work that we do. We haven't,
By necessity. By
yeah,
necessity. Yeah.
yeah, we haven't really tried to grab anything and everything that comes our way. We know what we want to do, and we are pretty much focused on that. So and at the same time, it's actually very interesting that we haven't really competed with a lot of law firms in this space. We, on the other hand, we conduct training sessions with legal affairs department in UAE, and I take trainings for blockchain introduction course, Kokila, and Kokila does the more advanced course on blockchain, and DLT Luna here, she does data protection courses. So we are, in our limited capacity, we are also trying to build that community of lawyers, who will possibly help the industries grow, because a dead industry is not something that anyone wants.
Yeah.
Of course.
Ramanuj, if I can add, so you mentioned earlier, how do we compete as a small new law firm and other players entering the same market? We believe in competition. So actually we support competition because it shows you that that market is growing. All right. So there's no need for intimidation. In fact, we try to see where we can partner with whom on certain projects, because that means growth for you and for me.
Yeah.
And that is our approach as a whole. And I must say that's under the mentorship of Kokila. She always reassures us, even if we have some doubt or worry, and that would be actually my message to all the attendees here. Don't be intimidated by competition. Competition is good. Competition shows that there's work. There's work for all of us. And I have a strength that you may not. Let me help you, and vice versa.
Right, right. That's a great message. Let's jump into one of the headline topics today. What is open banking, and what do you guys do in open banking, and how does law impact banking sector?
Right. So in a nutshell, open banking is really, sharing of financial information with which typically banks and financial institutions hold with third-party intermediaries or fintech solutions. This trend, and not just open banking, in fact, robo advisory also, and blockchain also. These are the technologies which came more into forefront, or sorry, these were the solutions which came more into forefront after the 2008 crisis. Uh, Without going much into the technicalities right now, but the idea of open banking really is that it's a customer centric approach. When you talk about digitized banking solutions, what is really happening is that a bank is digitizing a certain part of its services, and a customer has an access to those services. In case of open banking, what is really happening is that the customer is coming at the center of all of this, and that customer is getting multiple options from the banks. Let's say either it would be their services, it would be their banking products, it would be some kind of other other services that banks and financial institutions would be offering, and certain third party providers are facilitating it with uh, with with the help of banks. Now, how are the TPPs or third party providers able to do it? They integrate with the banking systems with something called an API, application programming interfaces. A very common term, normally used by techies across. But slowly, when these solutions started coming into place, regulators started realizing that multiple things, when it comes to the customer security in itself, might get compromised when you start involving any third parties, which is not a bank and not a financial institution regulated by the jurisdiction itself. So different jurisdictions started coming out with different regulations. Where we're sitting, Abu Dhabi Global Market came out with a guidance to kind of regulate how the APIs should operate and function, whether it's an open API, whether it's a private API, or what are the liabilities of the bank, what are the liabilities of the third party provider in that case. As we speak, Bahrain, for example, came out with an entire different set of module within their banking regulations. They came out with licenses for account information services, for payment initiation services, and different frameworks in and around that. I think it might be a good idea to just throw in a quick example here of how India is dealing with open banking, and a relatable example. So, for instance, in India, UPI is actually a form of, let's say, an open banking solution which is there. It is also a form of payment initiation solution which is existent at the federal level. As far as any kind of account information services are available, if I'm not mistaken, there's a 2016 directive where NBFCs have been mandated to act like account aggregators and share the account information as and where it's possible. But not only in India, across the globe, this trend is increasing. Now, if one was to speak as a lawyer, what is it that a lawyer can do in this case? Multiple things, honestly. Like starting from helping them to procure these TPPs, either the TPPs to procure these licenses which are appropriate, which are which are matching with the kind of services that they're providing. Some jurisdictions also require the solution providers to come out with something called a framework contract, which will basically give out information on what is the solution that you're offering, what is the process that is involved in that, what is the kind of information that you're collecting from the client, and what are the trigger points that you're essentially going to have. There is a huge data and cybersecurity angle to it also, but which I'll just let Luna really handle that. But in addition to this, as far as even the API governance is concerned, and that's something that even as Karm, we are trying to develop different solution legal advice on. Even API is nothing but it's a technical solution. But who are the parties which are going to act as nodes? Which are the parties which are going to have the kind of legal control internally from a governance model, or from a model which is more consumer friendly, or it secures the consumer? That is again something that actually a lawyer can actually put his or her head into. Other than that, I think Luna can possibly contribute a bit on data and cyber from that.
Yes, I'd love to. Thank you, Akshata.
Please, yeah.
So with open banking, essentially, at the core of it, and in terms of data privacy, individuals want confidence that the information is securely handled, and particularly so where there have been a number of high-profile privacy breaches, which I'm sure everybody has heard tremendous stories about, and on a daily basis we see notifications here of. Also, because of this, the global regulatory landscape has become increasingly strict in regulating these issues. The biggest issues that are faced by open banking here in terms of data privacy is data portability and proper consent of a data subject. So data portability is usually carried out then by a processing means which is automated. And that's where people need to understand what is that automation means and what have they exactly consented to. So open banking essentially is beneficial in that it gives customers control over their banking data, and it gives them the personal ability to share it with third parties. In so doing, it will transform banking globally. But of course, again, there's a generation of renewed focus on privacy. So in terms of banks, the banking data and the transfer of that data leads to an increased possibility that the data may be compromised. In terms of information security, we refer to always the information security CIA triad, okay? CIA standing for confidentiality, A standing for availability, and I standing for integrity. All right. So those principles must always be present when one speaks of security. Confidentiality refers to the limiting of access of systems and information to authorized users. Okay. Integrity is the assurance that the information is reliable and accurate. Availability refers to the guarantee of reliable access to the systems and the informations by authorized users. So what traditionally must happen is that in the exchange, so first of all, consent must be obtained. In the exchange or transfer of this data, it must be carried out in accordance with proper security or with proper security safeguards, as well as adhering to personal data rules and regulations surrounding this. And essentially, banks will need to rethink their traditional business models. Like Akshata said earlier, they'll have to place customer privacy at the very epicenter hereof. So until now, banks have largely captured the value of proprietary customer banking data, both the customer's personal data and their financial information. And they use it to inform marketing, sales, credit decisions, compliance activities, etc. But now this will be given to the customer itself, and the customer can decide what needs to happen with that. So just as a guideline, what I can say in terms hereof is that what essentially needs to occur in an open banking transaction is that a customer will initiate a data sharing request with the bank. The data sender, which is the bank, must ensure that they have the express consent, which specifies the data is shared, the clear purpose of the sharing of that data, who it is shared with, how long that data will be shared with that third party, and this in turn will facilitate transparency. Then the data sender must obviously ensure be able to identify correctly and extract only the specific customer data that they have consented to share, and that the data is secured. The transfer must occur in a correct format and within a secure environment. Then the third party data recipient must confirm that they too have the express consent and can use that data for the specified purpose as allowed for by the data subject, as well as how long they may use that data and what is to happen to that data once that transaction is complete. So again, just basic data principles need to be built in into the design of these types of technologies. Akshata?
Yeah. So I think just to wrap it up here, I think the fundamental difference that one will notice, Ramanuj, in this case is that for the longest time, until basically the advent of open banking, fintechs were operating on different systems, and BIN sponsorships were one of the most common forms of agreements, business identification number. But fundamentally, still, bank was remaining at the absolute crux of all of this. Bank had all the rights associated with account management, payment initiation, account information, and everything. With open banking, that responsibility is getting hedged. Very common example, UK, for instance, has embraced it very heavily. Because like the interest rates were soaring, and so interest rates were going down, and then people weren't really getting much into the investments in the entire banking sector. It significantly helped. Open banking significantly has helped, at least I can speak of UK and few other European jurisdictions. So yeah, it's more of a balancing act.
This is the future. Like as banking systems evolve and fintech become more mainstream, I think open banking seems to be something that is inevitable, and we'll have to see more and more of it. If you can tell us something about Robo Advisory. By the way, we are out of time, so to speak, but we started a little late, and if you guys can spare some extra time, should we continue? Is that okay?
Yeah, I think we're cool with it.
Please, we're available. I'm hoping everyone will stay tuned.
Yes, great. So if you can tell us a bit about Robo Advisory and what are the legal challenges around that.
Again, robo advisory. It's more of a colloquial term. Usually, the more this thing lawyers call it digital investment management. Whether or not it has any kind of you know, artificial intelligence attached to it is something which is again a contention. It's a contentious point. But essentially, what is happening in case of a robo advisory or a robo advisor is that your conventional systems of wealth management, invest management, asset management, where possibly it was done by more of a human interaction, you had human advisors, are slowly seeing a shift towards uh, something wherein the advice or the initiation of investments and balancing of portfolios is coming more out of a algorithm based solution.
Right. So there are certain rules which are built into algorithms, and it implements that in a way like something like an index fund, except that it goes beyond indexes. And
Precisely.
yeah, but basically there would be some hypothesis and rules that would be communicated to the investor beforehand, and it's implemented automatically.
And it can happen in multiple ways. It can happen in multiple areas and multiple sectors. So it could just be that you're possibly just giving an investment advice to a client, which again, it's a very heavily regulated activity in different parts of the world. It could also be that using a robo advisor, or a robo advisor is, let's say, giving also deciding, making decisions on in case of investments and portfolios on behalf of the investor. Again, at the same time, if there seems to be some kind of imbalance in the entire investment cycle and wealth management cycle, they can also rebalance the portfolios. Now there are different ways in which one can use a robo advisor. You can see hybrid models where a lot of companies have some or the other robo advisory solution along with, let's say, human advisor. Some of the companies also have gone completely independent, and they've only engaged digital investment management. But one can look at companies like Wealthfront in US. They're doing, I think, a phenomenal job. And legally speaking, this is very interesting space because the dynamics of liability significantly change in this case. When one used to deal with an investment advisor or a human advisor when it came to wealth and asset management, uh, it was pretty much clear as to how the dynamics of liability were going to be. What is the kind of advice that the investment advisor would give? Now with the use of algorithms, that those lines are getting blurred. If you add another layer of intelligence in it, then it's even more interesting. Either it could be just calculations basis of the algorithms, or it could also be more of processing of data, and then the outcomes which come with that. Again, different regulators have looked at it differently. ADGM, for example, here has placed significantly high prudential requirements on any of the companies which are either, which are utilizing robo advisory services. So there is a lot of, let's say, capital adequacy kind of model which has been because there is till date there is slightly either lack of trust, or we're still in the very early stages of how it will go forward from here in certain parts of the world. Big. So yeah, that's there. I think from a legal perspective, a lawyer's job can come into many aspects in this case. Uh, First, to establish what a robo advisor will do in itself is a humongous task, right? Uh,
Correct.
it's massive for a lawyer to kind of strike that balance from an internal governance model in itself in the company, as to what will be the point of authorization, what will be the point of, let's say, any kind of risk management, any kind of if there is some kind of crisis, what will be the
Yes.
response to that. So those are the kind of things which, to begin with, a lawyer can look at. Again, any kind of licensing options, any kind of licensing models, structuring options, uh, again, any kind of disclosure documents which a lawyer must which sorry an advisor must give to its clients, is again something
Right.
which is very different from how your regular investment advice would work versus your robo advisory would work. So there are so many requirements when it comes to the kind of disclosures that advisor is required to make, or the company
Yes.
engaging a robo advisor is required to make. Then again,
Correct.
data, cybersecurity, Luna, I think you should
Yes.
be over there.
So just to add what Akshata has discussed now, investors have actually embraced robo-advisors as a platform because it's more efficient and there's significantly lower cost in terms of investment. So this has attracted great, regulatory attention, particularly pertaining to the data and the algorithms used to drive the robo models. So regulators at this stage initially want to understand where is this data being sourced from and how accurately can it be used. And then from a security perspective as well, is that how can they prevent the data pipelines and algorithms against intrusion, avoiding breaks in the data chain or modification, data breaches, etc. Because any of those modifications could cause an inadvertent effect to the workings of this robo model and the outcome to such an investor. Another thing where Akshata had mentioned now what attorneys can do is, that we should have oversight for our clients who make use of these services in their contracting in terms of, certain indemnities and their risk exposure. And then also, what assurances are there against this? Are there any insurance policies in place or something that can guarantee if something were to go wrong and the fault does lie on the part of the service, what happens in that instance? So it's most certainly something to look at. But again, we as people should just generally be advised of the risk of these automated platforms and make sure that we are satisfied as to the security that is offered and the privacy that is respected in the makeup and build, as well as the execution and implementation throughout the life cycle of data being used within these technologies.
Understood. What do you mean by cyber resilience? So before you answer this question, just reminding everybody, we have been asking, you can post questions on our YouTube channel. You just have to head to Lawsikho, just to go to YouTube and look for Lawsikho channel, and there this is being streamed live, and you can go to the live chat and post your questions. There are already a bunch of questions that I'm going to take up in a few minutes, but let's hear about cyber resilience first. Yeah.
Thank you, Ramanuj. All right, cyber resilience, the keys in the name. We're speaking of cyber and we're speaking about how resilient you as an individual or as an organization is to cyber threats. All right, cyber threats can include many things. Examples would be malware in the form of ransomware, Trojans, worms. There could be forms of extortion, social engineering, phishing attacks, DDoS attacks, etc. I'm sure that these are buzzwords that everybody has heard somewhere along the lines or may have even been affected personally thereby in their organizations or in their personal capacities. So currently, every one of us has some sort of fear about something that we cannot see or control and do not have a full understanding of. The key word here is fear. So cyber attackers and criminals feed off this fear and base their angle of attack to exploit this fear through malicious and nefarious acts of whatever nature. One example that I can give you that's predominantly published in the news of late is fake COVID-19 pandemic themed websites or ploys that try to trick the end user into inputting information, which those cyber criminals then can harvest and either use against those people or monetize or exploit that data in some way, shape, or form. So what they traditionally also try and do is they try and drop some malware onto a mobile device or computer, whichever this person uses to communicate with. And they just have a total disregard for the current reality and the crisis that the world is presently facing. It's sad to see that the most targeted sector at present is healthcare and pharmaceuticals amidst this crisis. Hospitals are bearing the brunt here of, with several ransomware campaigns that are being witnessed globally for purposes, particularly for extortion. Ransomware is a form of malware that once executed on a device, so ransomware can arrive to your device in the form of an email. So traditionally, and what I have seen of late is that what will happen is that hackers will be able to gain access to a data system of a particular hospital. They will be able to retrieve information and data from that hospital's database and network to see who has been tested for the COVID-19 virus. From that information, they then try and communicate by various means. I'm going to use email in this case with those patients. And in the subject line of that email, they will write something like your test results or an urgent advisory notice to you, etc. In the body of the email, they will write something along the lines of, there's a notice attached for your urgent attention. Please take notice hereof and open the attachment. And they may then spoof a signature as well as a domain email address looking like it would come from that medical facility. What they then do is, if anybody opens that document, it either tries to redirect you to enter your details. So they could say to you, because it is password protected, please put in your government issued ID number, something along those lines, or your email address as well as your password to your email, or something along those lines. And they prey on the vulnerable. So in so doing, then they implant malware on your system, which makes your system open to them, and they can do whatever they like with your system. For example, they can log your keystrokes of your keyboard to see exactly what you type. So if ever you type in passwords and things, these are logged automatically, and they can see exactly what you're doing on your side. So this is quite scary. Another type of,
So how do law firms help in this? Like, how do you say Karm legal consultants help with these cases, or what is the role of the lawyer?
So, well, we first of all advocate to protect and safeguard yourself against the onset of such attacks. All right. So, cyber resilience, the traditional definition, is an organization or a person's capability to antedate, anticipate, and mitigate against any cyber attack. But also, if you are in fact attacked, then to withstand withstand the attack at the onset thereof and contain any such attack, in addition to recover from such attack. All right, so that in its traditional form is what cyber resilience is. So we as attorneys will help organizations to become cyber resilient and build the foundation to becoming, in fact, cyber resilient through a cyber resilience strategy and framework. So this framework would then identify and define the manner in which an organization's cyber resilience objectives are determined, the key role players and support members or personnel, as well as internal and external resources for the implementation and proper functioning of the strategic directives and processes to follow, the people, processes, and technology requirements for the proper management of cyber risks, and then the manner in which to communicate and timeously collaborate with relevant stakeholders and participants to effectively and expeditiously respond to any cyber attacks, as well as to recover therefrom. So this is what I've read to you now was actually part of a report that we'd written for the Arab Monetary Fund and the 22 Arab member states, as Akshata had previously referred to, because they wanted to bring uniformity to the financial market infrastructures of the Arab region to best protect themselves from a cyber resilience point of view. So cyber resilience is not only IT or cybersecurity. Cyber resilience brings together IT, cybersecurity, information security, threat intelligence, and then collaboration with all commercial departments within an organization, because everybody is responsible. Everyone's greatest weakness is a user themselves. Okay, so that's what people must understand. It's you that would click on that email. It's you that would perhaps install infected software on your system, etc. You need to be adequately informed and educated to best safeguard yourself and have the responsibility to safeguard your organization or your employer, etc. At the same time. This is particularly important now with people working from home and you know, the necessary safeguards that need to be taken, because now there's remote connections worldwide to, you know, back to where people would traditionally sit on one network and work from one network. Now there's remote networks and connections coming from vast, you know, areas. And it just increases that exposure to vulnerabilities of cyber attacks.
Right. So recently something that happened was, I shared about it on LinkedIn as well.
Yes.
Somebody sent a email to my CFO saying that, as pretending to be me, saying that, can you transfer this much money to my account immediately?
Yes, so
And
that's a phishing
yeah,
attack. That's
yeah,
a phishing attack. And if somebody were to actually write to you, so I'll give you an example as well. We had as Karm, I received an email saying that there's a fax coming from karmfax.com. And I know that we do not use faxes because we do not live in the 1960s. So we don't use faxes, and that immediately sent up, warning notices to me. And that, in fact, is a spear phishing campaign because they had spoofed that it actually came from Karm, and it was directly targeted to address me as Luna. So in your case, it was a phishing attack. My case, it was specific spear phishing. Very interesting.
No, it was even Spear in my case also. It was pretended.
Really?
The CF, they knew the CFO's name. The email pretended to be my email, and and it's strange. Like the person knew.
Yeah.
Somebody
Ramanuj,
can figure it from the LinkedIn also.
so
Yeah.
please have your network check, have your systems check, update everything, patch everything, and I'll tell you why. It shows that somebody's on your system. Somebody knows, somebody has information, and they have access to manipulate certain things. And you never know. So to tell you as well, on a wider organizational basis, these hackers they traditionally sit on networks for an average of about between 3 to 6 months. And all they do is observe. So if they sit on a banking system, all they do is observe. They get the necessary information. That malware sits on the network, and it sends telemetry and information back out to whoever's controlling it on the other side. It depends on the sophistication of this malware, because the malware can also self-execute on your system to do certain things. So please, yes, have that checked.
Definitely.
And
Now that you have,
addressed, yeah.
I definitely need to look into this aspect.
Yes. So what
okay,
we
great.
just do as just to add, what we do as attorneys is, okay, so obviously we try and educate in this field, but we need to be sufficiently technically resourced as well. So we do have a technical arm that does assist us with the deep technical aspects of these types of things. And then we obviously address more the regulatory side and try safeguard persons at the end of the day. Please go ahead, Ramanuj.
Yeah, so there are a bunch of questions. Some of them want to ask live questions, and I'm gonna bring them in a moment. Satvinder, Nagaraj, Sumit, please hold on. There's
Yes,
some questions that people have already asked earlier on YouTube. Let me just ask few of those quickly. Vaibhav is asking for someone wanting to work in the fintech side of law. Would you recommend working in a general corporate law firm initially in their careers and then move on to a niche area like tech? Or should they basically start in tech from the beginning? I think I need to unmute Akshata.
Yes, please. There we go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. So if I understand the question correctly, it says that if it is a good idea to start with a corporate law firm and
I want to eventually work in fintech, but should I start with the general corporate kind of law firm and then eventually move to technology side, or is it okay to start with technology from the beginning? That's the question.
well, I don't think anything is stopping anyone from kind of, having a keen interest in technology nonetheless.
And doing it from the beginning, you mean? Like, you don't have to really worry about that. Am I specializing too early and stuff like that?
No, so okay, see, here's the thing, and that's the beauty of technology. Technology is very specific, technology law is specific, but it is also for everything and everyone, right? So at the end of the day, you end up dealing with a lot of corporate law transactions, a lot of corporate governance transactions nonetheless. So a good understanding of corporate law and corporate governance is absolutely necessary, even if you have to practice tech law. Whether or not to move that, whether or not to make that switch, or how it goes, is I think very personal choice. But there is no right time to start reading about technology laws.
Absolutely.
It's continuously changing.
Yeah.
Right. Got it. There's a question. Next question is, being a law student, how to move on to become a prudent cyber law practitioner? Yeah, how to become a good cyber law
Fantastic.
practitioner?
I love the question. Thank you so much for that. All right. So look,
Mhm.
cyber law is also very broad. Okay. But what I would recommend is that everything focuses around data. First, get your head wrapped around data and data privacy laws. Understand what personal data is, and then understand the other categories of data as well and how to best safeguard that. Then you move over to IT, understand the architecture behind the technology, because that is what IT is. Okay, it's the information technology architecture to facilitate networks, processes, etc. Then you move on to information security. How do you safeguard those those transfers, processes, and those network systems, etc.? That's something to look into. And then if you want to look at something very, very interesting, and this is where you do things like threat hunting and analyses and forensics around things, you can look at vulnerability testing. So you can look at penetration testing, scenario-based testing, etc., red team testing, and then move on to threat intelligence, which is a very niche field of cybersecurity. But to become a lawyer in this space, I would say have your traditionalist background. Like I say, look at IT laws, look at the governing laws surrounding telecommunications specifically, look at the regulations concerning cybersecurity. References that I can give you is international standards like the NIST standard, NIST, the ITIL standards, the iOS IEC standards. There's so many to work from, and they're all fantastic. And you know, one that has probably most recently and most popular is COBIT 5, because COBIT 5 brings together business growth and integrates that with the cyber protection. So they try to see how they can best manage business processes to still ensure business growth and gains from ensuring protection and security. So please have a look at those things and just start reading. You know, we're all subscribed on LinkedIn. I must say there's fantastic resources available. Look at hashtags to follow. Read up about these things, but become familiar with the terminology, and you'll pick up more and more as you do go along.
I think the idea is to develop an interest and keep pursuing it over a period of time and do as much as you can. I mean, it's like
Absolutely.
consistency is very important, because a lot of people say, oh, this year I want to do sports law, next year cyber
Yes.
law, and another year something else, which is very normal
Correct.
for a law student. But
Correct.
yeah, but you I think to really pick up something and be good at it, and you can't just be good, you have to be one of the best at it to succeed as a lawyer.
That's
So
right.
so
Correct.
I think it's
If I can
important to have
say,
long-term interest.
yes, and absolutely. And can I say that, you know, India is the perfect space to have this interest, because India, and I applaud India as a country that has taken notice of these things many, many years ago, whereas other countries are lagging far behind in this region. Um, Look specifically at the Computer Emergency Response Team, a CERT team that was created by the Reserve Bank back in 2016. And it's also made in terms of the I think is your IT law, if I'm not mistaken. So please have a look at those things, and those are various roles that you can take up. You needn't practice specifically as a lawyer, but you can be legal counsel to entities such as this.
Great. There's a question. This was a question by Ayush Arora. Next question from Advocate Raja Sekharan. Basic details on robo advisory and cyber resilience and how it should be proceeding in the future. Also, that would be what would be the opportunities in India as cryptocurrencies are not allowed as illegal. I think the first part we have already answered.
Yeah.
What would you say about, what do you think are the opportunities going to be like in India, given that cyber currencies are not specifically legal? It is not illegal. Like, I mean, there are some there's a Supreme Court judgment which recently kind of allowed them to interface with the banking system, but there's no clear situation about that. And to be honest, I have seen a lot of companies who are doing great work in cryptocurrencies, blockchain in India, all have moved out of India. They have moved to Australia, they have moved to Dubai, they have moved to Malta, they have moved to Japan, but they are not in India. So how do you look at this? I mean, what are your thoughts on how things will play out in
We
this
had in
space?
fact written an entire piece on this earlier, like a couple of months ago. It's definitely positive. See, I mean, that Supreme Court judgment was absolutely necessary. There are no two ways about it. Having said that, there will be a lot of aspects, the way I see it, which will come into play when people start talking about tokenization, when people start talking about use of blockchain in different sectors like, medtech, real estate. A lot of things will come into play. From our experience, at least, we've seen that tokenization, for instance, has brought a lot of liquidity to real estate market, right? Because you can share a lot of resources, you can invest with small ticket investments. So things will change, and I don't think it's just for India. It's for any jurisdiction which kind of specifically embraces cryptocurrencies and the byproducts of blockchain. I mean, look at it in this situation, right? In case of COVID-19 situation, banking channels are severely impacted. Yeah. So
Yeah.
having cryptocurrencies as a mode of payment, having them as, okay, I mean, legal tender, calling it a legal tender is a fast stretch, but still something which is comparable to that can be a solution in many ways.
Yeah.
So
And like you say, Akshata, I agree with you 100%. One of the main topics of discussion currently by the central bank and monetary authorities is digital currencies that are actually issued by the monetary authorities or the central banks. So although this is not the cryptocurrency discussion, but we are looking at those modes, and the world is slowly transforming and becoming very digitized in that sense. So yes, embrace it. It is coming. It is coming.
Yeah, and even if it is adopted a little later in India, it's still coming. Like
Yeah,
you
it's
might
coming.
want to,
Yes,
right,
absolutely.
right. So like you mentioned that your founder Kokila had done this thing much
Yes,
earlier.
she
I've
did
been waiting for the
electronic
wave to
money.
come,
hmm.
and then you can do the same now in India
That's
and
right.
we must go a little beyond whether cryptocurrency should be legal or not. Like let's not
Yes,
talk about that anymore. Let's
Yeah,
talk about
yes,
specific, a little more, not so superficial topics, but more deeper topics. So like for example, how can blockchain work in real estate? What should be the governance model? What should be
yes.
some of the potential, something that the regulators might approve and so on. So we need to go a little deeper.
in fact,
uh,
capital markets is a sector, Ramanuj, which will be hugely impacted by the entire tokenization.
Absolutely. In BSc,
Yeah,
NSE both have set up their own blockchain research divisions and product
Exactly.
yeah.
development divisions. So,
And because we have worked with so many regulators for issuances of security tokens, asset tokens,
Mm,
there are a lot of looming questions which will come into play once people start using this. Can tokens be equated with shares? Can tokens be equated with convertible securities, for instance? So many solutions already exist. Regulators will have to kind of pace up their regulations for that.
And if I may just
right.
add as well, there is such a stereotype surrounding these types of things. When one speaks of crypto, we often get feedback that it's illegal. That's the straightforward answer that people accept. And the terms that Akshata has just described to you is actually forms of cryptocurrencies that are backed against something else, some sort of security, etc. So, or whatever it is then backed against, there's various models that exist. But that is what regulators are looking at now, and what people need to understand is that this is a means and a viable means of liquidity creation, and it's the
Yeah,
future.
it is not only about the speculation on Bitcoin prices, like which
Not at
people in
all.
India
Much more.
Not at all.
have reduced it to, right? So a lot of for a lot of people, even for the regulator, I think it came down to that. Oh, people are speculating using these
I
things
think
too
I think
much.
once
So,
they move past this, there are so many other issues to look at. Honestly, if one has to look at issues, there's so much more to kind of resolve from a regulatory perspective. I'm really looking forward to, like, SEBI starting to play a role in this entire debate, because from a securities perspective, it will matter a lot when SEBI comes into the picture.
absolutely,
Correct.
I think it's a matter
Exciting.
of time. Yes. There's a question about from Sumit, and Sumit wanted to speak. Actually, I don't see his raised hand anymore. But his question was: is indicate the general impact of telemedicine practice guidelines 2020 and personal data protection. I mean, do you have any comments on that? I mean, it's not necessary that you have to have, because I mean,
So I think what I'm not going to comment on is the telemedicine practice in India, because but we have worked a lot in the telemedicine sector in UAE itself. Recently, Ministry of Health and Prevention in Abu Dhabi, just well in time, came out with entire telemedicine guidelines themselves, where delivery of drugs, delivery of prescriptions, consultations with the doctors, all of this was made kind of, there were guidelines for making it possible by electronic means. One of our very first projects in this regard was also an app which facilitates verification of organ donation and medicines and the authentication of medicines. So at least from our in our part of the world, in UAE at least, we have seen a lot of surge in the use of telemedicine products, telemedicine solutions. At the same time, as far as the data is concerned, the dynamics are still changing. We're still seeing, I'm sure Luna can contribute more, but from the entire project's perspective, at least, we're still seeing how it will play out when it comes to the personal data, personal sensitive information, and vice versa, a solution which is absolutely necessary in such a situation, right?
Absolutely. And what I just can add there to, health information exchanges are focus areas, of technology that are also being explored by various entities. And I'm quite sure it's the same in India, because we have a few clients that we service in this field. But it's central repositories for health information, and it would involve patient treatment, the diagnoses, the issuing of prescriptions, the issuance of drugs, and the transportation of those drugs to a particular patient, etc. So those things are being looked at, and from a data protection perspective, again, it must have the patient at the very core of their approach in the build and makeup hereof. So again, necessary safeguards and constant adherence to very sensitive information of a data subject.
Okay, so there are a lot of questions that have come in, and there are some people who want to ask questions personally also. So the next questions, we need to keep the answers very short. Okay, there's a question on blockchain courses for lawyers. Couple of people have asked this, that if as a lawyer I want to learn more about blockchain and regulation and technology, is there any specialized course for that? Yes.
So see, the conventional answer to this would be that there are a lot of courses offered by Harvard, Oxford, MIT. All of them have courses. Coursera has some good courses. Udemy has some good courses.
These are blockchain courses, not blockchain law. Regulation.
No, they have the Harvard and Oxford, both the courses. They have modules for lawyers also, and they're catered to professionals in such a fashion that you will end up at least understanding about the industry and certain legal aspects of it. Having said that, a lot of this is going to be based on your self research also. That's how at least we learned. You don't have to know everything about that technology in itself, but try and conceptually understand it and look at the approach that regulators have taken. Don't necessarily read through each and every word of the law, but regulatory approach, the discussions on how regulators have looked at it will help you in so many different ways.
Yes. And use cases. Ramanuj, really, use cases are how we learn.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. There is a question on that I'm practicing for the past 10 years in the corporate field. I would like to move towards cyber law practice and tech law practice. How can I move and guide? This is the question from Hari Velu. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Akshata.
It's a little tricky. So one answer to this is just take the plunge.
Take the plunge, look for opportunity, but become educated whilst you wait for that opportunity. So start reading, start researching.
Start writing, publishing.
Yes, absolutely. Get feedback from people. Look for these types of things. Clients also did not just jump into our laps at the start of our practice, we had to also understand what our role is as attorneys within this field and what we are able to offer. So take the time to understand the bases of these concepts, and from there understand what your application as an attorney could be in this field. But there are an abundance of resources available on the internet. Make use thereof, and get in touch with us, please. We're happy to share. We always share a lot of information. Our LinkedIn profiles are very active in this space, so please reach out where we can help.
Great, awesome. There's a question of, okay, so there are a couple of questions around if I want to work on cybersecurity as a lawyer. Several people have asked this, that how much technology do I need to understand? Is it okay if I understand just the law, or do I need to be good at technology?
You do need to be good at technology for the purpose only of serving your client. You need to understand what your client's technology is and what the makeup thereof is, because Akshata will tell you as well, with technology, you're the one at the end of the day doing the paperwork and explaining what exactly it is. You're preparing the contract, you're preparing the charter documents of the licensing of that technology, or the functioning implementations, submissions to regulators, etc. So you have to understand the technology. We often consult with the actual developers of the technology, the technicians, etc. You have to have and deep dive into that understanding. But like Akshata said to you now, in terms of blockchain, it doesn't mean you have to know every single aspect of blockchain, because there is so much to it. But if you are mandated by a client that has a specific piece of software or something that
Unique
works on a blockchain platform, you do need that, and you need to understand prudently what it is that they do with that technology and where it goes from point A to point Z.
Exactly. And like Luna said, I think, and that's been at least our approach with our clients, that you focus on three things. One, what is your input in that technology when it comes to your client? What is it that you are doing with that certain technology? What is the kind of the process which internally it is going through? And most importantly, what is the output that is going on to an investor? From the perspective of somebody who's consuming that technology, who's your client and who's the investor, what is it that that person is getting in return? Segregating projects basis these three things, and kind of, we do a lot of flow charts and infographics with our clients, but it always helps to see where it ends and how it ends. Ramanuj, did we lose
Great. So, what I have sometimes suggested to lawyers as to how much technology they need to understand is that, imagine that you had to sell this piece of technology, go and sell it to somebody, right? Like to a potential buyer. And you'd have to understand the technology to be able to sell it. So you need to know at least that much to be able to sell it. So, I think maybe that is a benchmark that one can follow. So, but basically you have to learn technology. The short answer is that you have to understand technology.
I mean, you need to remember, you don't have to develop that technology. So keep that always remember that you're not the one developing it. You're the one adjudicating it in a fashion that it works for everyone, for the regulator, for the investor, and for the project itself.
Yeah. And one thing, if I can also just add to this, Ramanuj, is that we've seen that, with technology as well, there is so much development in this space. And because it is such a costly thing, a lot of our clients will not try and reinvent the wheel. So they will build on existing software systems and build thereupon to develop something else. So you would already have that initial understanding of the operations of this specific tool or its purpose and its makeup, and where what is further developed thereon. So like I say, you learn this in practice as you go along. Ramanuj, I think you're...
Yeah, I think it's muted.
You're either stuck or concentrating extremely hard.
Yeah, clearly I'm having some internet problem suddenly, but in any case,
Not a problem.
I think if you can you guys hear me now?
Yes,
perfectly.
Okay, great. I think the internet's working again. So I think we are going to wrap it up here because it has been almost close to 2 hours, I think. And I think this was a really valuable session. There were a bunch of questions. Let me see if anybody wants to quickly ask a question. Nagaraj has been wanting to ask a question for a long back, so Sadbinder will quickly take these questions, and then we'll wrap. Yes, Nagaraj, please, your question. Nagaraj, I have unmuted you. If you're there, please ask the question. Okay. I can't hear any questions. So let's go to Sadbinder next. Sadbinder, do you have a question that you want to ask?
Yeah, I do have. Good evening, everyone. My name is Satwinda. I'm working with the compliance. I work with the ISO 27000 cybersecurity. So, and I'm also started pursuing LLB. So, does the background of working in the compliance and LLB degree will help me in working on the fintech or on cybersecurity?
Satvinder, you will have an added advantage. I can tell you that much. And congratulations for that, because I had to do the reverse. I first did law and then I went back to the tech space. So yes, absolutely. That will help you tremendously. ISO 27001 and 002 is going to be of great value to you in this field. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you. And the moment you were touching base on CIA triads,
yes,
so
yes.
that caught my complete attention. That this is something which I know.
Yes, exactly.
Sadvinder, you are a Lawsikho student, right? Sadvinder, you're a Lawsikho student, right? From what I remember.
I have attended a lot of sessions, so I'm about to enroll in the contract drafting, course, in this.
All right. No problem.
Fantastic.
Great.
Satvinder, you know what? It's going to give you a fantastic advantage. I mean, compliance in itself is a niche field, and not every attorney can practice in the compliance field. So if you understand compliance in terms of technology, you have an added advantage, and you will be able to implement your skills accordingly. So please go with it.
Thank you for the valuable answer.
Excellent.
Thank you for the question.
Great. Let me check if Nagaraj is available. Nagaraj, do you have a question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Luna, and one more, I forgot her name. Sorry.
Hi, Akshata.
Yeah, Akshata. Yeah.
Akshata.
See, basically, I'm a lawyer with more than 10 years of experience. I come from an intellectual property background. Now I want to shift my focus more on technology because I also understand a lot of technology at the same time. But only thing is, these days I didn't concentrate much over there.
Yes.
So what do you think my first focus should be? Of course, I heard your other comments. Maybe if you want to give more weightage on, see, I already enrolled for a few courses at the same time. So anything else you want me to do? And I'm also not finding any, much technology practice or clients. So what should I do if I have to,
Najaraj, may I ask you, are you specifically a patent attorney?
Yeah, I'm a patent attorney.
So you understand the makeup of technology then as well, am I right?
Yes, correct.
So you can help with IP in technology for that specific purpose. Trademarks are very popular in the cyber field. What they call framing and linking of certain pages, etc., and infringements in that sphere is going to be very important for you. So absolutely, once again, just like I said to Satvinder, is that you have an added advantage and you have a specific niche as well.
Okay. But only thing is, initially, I'm not able to get the inroads to more technological clients. So what do you think?
Nagaraj, let's talk about that sometimes. Let's talk about that sometimes. We need to wrap up today, and happy to help you. And maybe Luna and Akshata can share some. You can connect with them over LinkedIn and take it forward because it's a long,
I'll do
question.
I'll do that. I'll take it offline. Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you, both of you.
Thank you, Nagaraj.
Thank you, Ramanuj.
Thank you. Harish, let's see if Harish wants to ask something quickly. Harish, a short question, please, quickly. Oh no, Harish, no questions. Vijayanand, you have any questions? You have been unmuted. Vijayanand, still not unmuted. No, anyway, this is not working.
Hello.
Vijayanand is. Vijayanand,
Hello.
you're unmuted. Yeah, please,
Okay.
please
Okay. Good evening.
speak. We can hear you.
Hi, good evening.
Yes.
Evening.
What
Hi,
do you want to
Luna.
ask?
Hi, Akshata. Okay. My question was on the cyber front. So
We can hear you,
basically,
Vijayanand.
yeah, in spite of all the
Okay.
cyber threats that's there in the world,
Right.
any
Okay. So, anybody has any other further questions? Please. Acha, please,
Sorry
go
about
ahead.
it,
Please
hon.
ask the question.
Yes, I think he's muted.
Yes, I do believe
Ramanuj,
he's trying to ask a question.
No,
Vijayadevant
Vijayanand is
is
not
muted.
muted. He's unmuted.
I see him as muted. I'm sorry, I speak
Vijayanand is
under
not
correction.
Yeah.
Now he's muted.
yeah,
There we
hi,
go. There
hello.
we go. Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, you're able to hear me?
Yes, thank
Yes,
you.
yes, we
Please
can.
go ahead.
Okay. My question is on the cyber front. So basically, we are having all those cyber threats across the globe. Now, what we are trying to do is basically we, put up all those technical measures. Various entity adopt various, measures to
Yes,
protect themselves.
yes,
However, given all this, still you have the threats continuing, and any entity can be hacked at any point in
yes,
time.
yes.
Now, as attorneys, whenever you discuss with any of your clientele, do you advocate cyber insurance as part of this?
Very
Because
much so. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you for the valuable question. It's part of your risk transfer. Transfer your risk, but understand what you are insuring yourself against and make sure that the policy is adequately worded to provide you with adequate coverage in this case. But thank you for understanding the concept that people should see cyber attacks as an imminent threat and that you will be attacked as opposed to if you will be. If you understand what I mean. So rather expect the attack rather than say, you may just end up as a statistic and take your chances. Expect an attack.
Great. So, okay. So I think we have answered more or less all the questions, and thank you both of you, Luna and Akshata, for joining us and sharing your valuable time and insights with us. It was really a pleasure. I'm sure there's a lot of things we can still learn from you, and would love to have you again talking about more specific issues. Thank you so much. Any parting messages? We'll wrap up.
Thank you so much, Ramanuj. We had a great time. I think it's always nice to talk to people who want to listen about technology, listen about law. I think that's something that drives us on a daily basis. So yeah, thank you so much.
Great.
Ramanuj, the same from me, and thank you very much to everybody that tuned in today, made the time and efforts to join us, and as well as the active participation. We're very grateful. We're very happy for you to interact with us. I'm always happy to share ideas and collaborate on certain things. So please reach out to us. And Ramanuj, please, we'd love to have you have or have a seat back as participants in further sessions. And of course, we'll be audience members in other sessions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thank you,
Take care.
everybody.
Stay safe at home. Don't
And
step
you.
out. Stay safe. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you.